And of course, I ask again the people doing the introduction, please, no more than 10 minutes possibly, just give the overview. So apart from, yeah, the list is complete. So I think I asked Peter Clarke just to give a very short introduction about EGEE. The only difference between EGEE and the other one is that EGEE is much more advanced than the other ones because it has been submitted already. So
that's true, yes. So I'm going to, yes, we're on, are we? Oh, no, we're not. I'm going to give a minute's introduction to the EGEE proposal that, as you've just said, was submitted on the 6th of May to the first tranche of Framework 6 calls. It's okay, well, I can move on. EGEE, as you'll see on the first slide when we get it up, is all about building a production grid infrastructure across Europe. And I'll stress this now and probably a few times throughout this brief talk, that this is nothing to do with R&D. And many of the other proposals are, of course, set much more in the context of development and even research. Now, EGEE is to build a production grid infrastructure. The little picture there is meant to guide the eye to the fact that it should be useful to many and all applications, scientific applications, other applications. EGEE sits in the middle as an infrastructure providing compute services to Europe, and of course EGEE itself requires and needs and builds upon the GEL network underneath it. It's important that it will build upon the rather massive investments made in many countries, certainly in some, into grid and e-science infrastructure. A lot of money has been put on in the last year. We have also, in Europe, made lots of contacts with projects in other areas, particularly, of course, the US, and here we think of several of the grid projects, the Globus team, and so on. And it will also be built upon what we should acknowledge are some very important pioneering results that have come out of the Framework 6 projects. Now, the approach then is to bind national infrastructures, and I'll come back to that in the next slide, and to procure and deploy, I wouldn't go as far as to say industrial quality software today, but much more robust software upon the infrastructure than has been possible in the prototype grids built in the last tranche. So if I leave one message from this, it should be this, so I can finish the talk after this slide, really. The analogy you should take away is the following. Just as GÉANT binds national network infrastructures, it doesn't build the national infrastructure, it binds them in a rather obvious way and very successfully, of course. Then EGEE, that's the lines on this picture, then EGEE will bind existing national grid infrastructures. So it's a presupposition that national groups have such an infrastructure. Now, of course, binding them is then, that's what the stars are. Binding them is not then quite the same as building a grid that someone joins them. It's the software support, operations, and robust software that goes with that. That's the best model you can take away. So nothing to do with R&D. The consortium is shown there. You'll see that it's made up of individual large countries or consortia, regional consortia, okay, and covers, I would say, all, but my geography is not that good, so most or all of Europe. It was submitted to the Network Development Grids FP6 call, and for those that know the new EU framework, you can put in 3 activities. You in a project put in 3 activities. This is known as an I3, but it's very similar to an IP for those of you that know that. So the 3 activities, networking, meaning people networking, not networking, specific service activities and joint research activities. And I'm just going to briefly run through what those are, and then I'm finished, and I think I'll be well under my 10 minutes. Now, the networking activities are those that you might imagine: management, coordination, training, support, dissemination, but importantly, an interface to prototype pilot applications that are going to be able to use this grid, of course, because it better be useful to real applications. Whoops. That's a very short talk. In the transfer, approximately 6 slides have got cut out. Either that or somebody was cutting my talk down, so I'll say what was in them. So between there were 2-3 more slides, and what they said is this. Under the specific service activities, I mean, it's very difficult to interpret quite what these terms mean. This is new ground for all of us in Framework 6. But there are, call it work packages is the wrong term, but activities in operation centres. So one or two major operation centres plus regional operation centres. Software re-engineering, the sort of middleware that has been deployed on prototypes so far is, to put it a little flaky in places. So a very important function is to procure and re-engineer where necessary, but not develop for its own sake production or near production quality software to deploy on the grid. There are activities in, coming to the network specifically, activities in resource allocation and network access, no, I'm not very good with that, my slides, access to network resources such as bandwidth on demand, quality of service, as well as performance monitoring. So I think that's about all I can remember from my slides. There we are. So I'll just come to the finish then. So we build a production grid for Europe. It'll bind national grids. You're meant to take this little picture away in your mind. It will require staggered proposals, I might say. The first tranche has gone into the call which had 50 million allocated, of which EGEE, if approved, would of course only get a fraction of that. And so although the first was submitted on May the 6th, then there will be follow-up submissions. The next call's in over a year's time.
Thank you, Peter, for the very quick but very clear overview. I think that questions, we take them all together after the various presentations, so we can open the debate about interaction between the different projects. And next one is Victor.